When the alarm clock rang at 3 in the morning, the world outside the window was still steeped in a thick darkness. I fumbled to turn it off, my fingertips brushing against the cold metal surface, and a shiver ran through me. These 79-year-old bones weren't what they used to be. Every time I got up, it felt like restarting a rusty machine, my joints groaning under the strain. I slowly sat up, reached for the cane by my bed, and made my way to the kitchen by the dim glow of the nightlight. Inside the refrigerator, a fresh chicken breast I'd been saving was sealed in a container. It was an organic piece my old neighbor, Dr. Arthur, had brought me last week. He said it was free-range, perfect for making a nourishing broth. Daniel had been working so much overtime lately, he needed something to keep his strength up. I muttered to myself as I carefully placed the chicken into the slow cooker, adding carrots, celery, and a few herbs. Once the water boiled, I turned the heat down to low, covered it, and let it simmer. The kitchen soon filled with the fragrant aroma of vegetables. I sat on a small stool, watching the bubbles rise through the glass lid, just like when I used to make soup for my son when he was young. I remember Daniel was frail and sickly as a child. I'd often stay up all night, tending to his fevers. After my husband passed, I raised our boy alone, working at the textile mill during the day and taking on sewing jobs at night. During the hardest times, there were 3 straight months when I lived on nothing but peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but I never let my son miss a single meal with meat. The broth in the pot slowly turned a rich amber color, and the sky outside shifted from black to gray. I checked the wall clock. 4:50. It was time to go. Daniel always woke up at 6, and I had timed it perfectly so I could get there just as he was getting up, ready for his first warm bowl of soup. I carefully poured the chicken soup into a thermos and wrapped it in a thick woolen scarf. The January wind cut like a knife. Leaning on my cane, I shuffled step by step toward my son's house. He and his wife lived in a new condo complex not far from my old place. What was normally a 20-minute walk now took me double the time. The streets were nearly empty, save for a few sanitation workers sweeping the sidewalks. My fingers gripped the thermos tightly, terrified it would get cold. The arthritis in my left leg throbbed with pain, but I gritted my teeth and kept going. The thought of my son's face, warm and flushed after drinking the hot soup, made the pain seem insignificant. At 5:40, I finally stood before my son's front door. The motion sensor light in the hallway flickered on, illuminating my face, which was red from the cold. I took a deep breath, about to ring the doorbell, when I suddenly heard the sharp, mocking laughter of my daughter-in-law, Chloe, from inside. "Is your mother here with that soup again? Who would dare drink something from that old hag? God knows what kind of filth she puts in it." My finger froze in midair, and my heart clenched. "Keep your voice down," I heard my son, Daniel, say. But there wasn't a trace of anger in his voice. Instead, it was tinged with a fawning, apologetic tone. "She's a little hard of hearing. She won't hear you." "I don't care. We have to throw it out this time. The last batch gave me an upset stomach for 2 days. Chloe's voice rose even higher. "Do you think she does it on purpose? She just can't stand to see us happy." All right, we'll toss it." Daniel's words were like daggers in my heart. "Mom really is too much, coming over this early and waking us up. Tell her not to come anymore." "Just looking at her is bad luck," Chloe screeched. "She's almost 80. Who knows when she'll just drop dead on our doorstep? How disgusting. Mom, don't come over anymore." My son's words floated out, light as air, yet they landed on my heart with the weight of 1,000 pounds. I stood outside the door, my whole body trembling, not from the winter cold, but from a chill that seeped from the very core of my being. The thermos in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. I slowly crouched down and placed it on the doormat in front of the door. As I turned to leave, the arthritis in my legs flared with a sharper pain, but I didn't dare linger, afraid they would open the door and see me. During the few dozen seconds the elevator descended, I bit my lip so hard I thought it would bleed, fighting to keep the tears from falling. Stepping out of the building, the sky had begun to lighten. The streetlights in the complex were still on, casting hazy yellow halos in the morning mist. I wandered aimlessly, and without realizing it, ended up in a small neighborhood park nearby. A thin layer of frost coated the benches, but I didn't care about the cold. I collapsed onto one, finally letting the tears I had held back for so long stream down my face. "Helen?" A familiar voice made me hastily wipe my eyes. I looked up to see my old neighbor, Dr. Arthur, standing before me in his jogging suit, his expression full of concern. "What are you doing out here so early?" he asked, sitting down beside me. His gaze fell on my swollen eyes. "Did something happen?" I forced a smile. "It's nothing, just out for a walk." "Doctor," Arthur sighed. He clearly didn't believe me but was kind enough not to press. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to me. "Did you ever go for that checkup I mentioned?" I shook my head. "Last month, I had fainted at the farmer's market, and it was Dr. Arthur, out for his morning run, who had found me. He insisted on taking me to the hospital, saying I was severely anemic and needed further tests. "You don't look like it's nothing," Dr. Arthur said, his brow furrowed. "Are you having any chest pain?" I froze, surprised by his perceptiveness. It was true. Ever since leaving my son's apartment, a dull ache had been spreading across my chest, as if an invisible hand were squeezing my heart. "A little tightness," I admitted in a small voice. "Doctor," Arthur's expression turned serious. "You have to get that checked out at the hospital. Does your son know about this?" The word son was like a needle pricking my heart. I shook my head and managed a weak smile. "He's so busy with work. I don't want to bother him." "No matter how busy he is, he can't just neglect his mother," Dr. Arthur said indignantly. "Was it easy for you, raising him all by yourself? Everyone on our old street knows you worked 3 jobs to put him through college. And now he—" "Arthur," I cut him off gently. "I'd like to be alone for a little while." He looked like he wanted to say more but held back. Finally, he patted my shoulder and stood up. "I'm on call at the hospital at 9. You have to come in. Just tell them you're my patient. You won't have to wait." I nodded, watching his retreating figure jog away, my heart a tangled mess of emotions. He was right. Everyone on our old street knew that I, Helen, had given everything for my son. But now, the soup I made was poured down the drain, and my care had become a source of bad luck. The park started to fill with people, seniors doing their morning exercises, young professionals rushing to catch the bus. I looked at them and suddenly felt a loneliness more profound than any I had ever known. After my husband died, Daniel became my entire reason for living. He got into a good college, found a great job, got married every step he took. I was filled with pride. But when did I become a burden in his life? When the sun had fully risen, I leaned on my cane and started the slow walk home. As I passed a trash can, I saw a familiar thermos, the one I had left at my son's door this morning. The lid was open, and it was completely empty. My chicken soup. They had really thrown it away. Back home, I collapsed onto the sofa in exhaustion. On the coffee table lay a lighter Daniel had left behind when he came for dinner last week. I picked it up, rubbing its smooth surface, and remembered his adorable smile as a child. He was so thoughtful back then. He would give me back rubs and save his allowance to buy me hand lotion. The phone suddenly rang, and I struggled to reach for it. "Mom, it's me." It was Daniel's voice, as casual as ever, as if the hurtful words from this morning had never been spoken. "Chloe said she saw a thermos by the door. You came by?" I gripped the receiver, the ache in my chest returning. "Yes, I brought you some chicken soup." "Oh, Mom, I've told you not to go to so much trouble." His voice was laced with false concern. "Chloe has a sensitive stomach. She can't just eat anything. You shouldn't bother with this in the future." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. "All right. Oh, by the way," his voice suddenly filled with excitement, "I heard our old neighborhood is scheduled for redevelopment. Those old townhouses of yours must be worth a fortune now." My eyes shot open. The redevelopment was just a rumor. I had never mentioned it to him. How did he know? "Who told you that?" I asked cautiously. "Just some guys at work were talking," he stammered. "Mom, if it's true, what are you planning to do with the houses?" I was silent for a moment, then said slowly, "I haven't thought about it." "You're getting older, Mom. You should let me handle things like this." His tone became suddenly eager. "I know a few developers. I can get you the best possible deal." "I may." My heart sank. Those 5 townhouses were everything my husband had left me, my only safety net for retirement. No matter how difficult things had gotten over the years, I had never once considered selling them, wanting only to pass them down to my son and grandchildren. "We'll see," I answered quietly. "I'm a little tired. I'm going to hang up now." After putting down the phone, I went to the window and looked out at the bright sunshine. When had the son I was so proud of become someone who only cared about my assets? And the daughter-in-law I had treated as my own had called me an old hag. A sharp pain shot from my chest down my left arm. I stumbled, catching myself on the windowsill as cold sweat soaked through my shirt. I fumbled in my pocket for Dr. Arthur's handkerchief. His phone number was embroidered on the corner. In the last moment before my vision blurred, I dialed it. "Arthur, it's Helen." My heart, it hurt so much. I slowly opened my eyes to the glare of fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic. A white ceiling, pale blue curtains, and the IV needle in the back of my hand. I was in the hospital. "Helen, you're awake." Dr. Arthur's face came into view, his brow creased with worry. "You had an acute myocardial ischemia. Any later and it would have been very dangerous." I tried to sit up, but he gently pushed me back down. "Don't move. We haven't finished the EKG." "What? What happened to me?" My voice was hoarse, unrecognizable. "Insufficient blood flow to the heart," Dr. Arthur said, adjusting the 4-drip. "We need to run more tests. Does your son know you're here?" The word son was like another needle in my heart. I shook my head. Don't tell him." Dr. Arthur paused, then sighed. "I'm going to do my rounds. I'll be back in a couple of hours. You get some rest. Don't move around. End of Trass." After he left, I watched the fluid drip, drop by drop, into my vein. My thoughts drifted back to the words I had overheard at my son's door that morning. Old hag's soup. Bad luck. Every word was a knife twisting in my heart. From outside my room, I could hear nurses talking. "That poor woman in 302. It's her 4th miscarriage." "Shh, keep it down. Her husband doesn't know yet. I heard she hides it every time, just pretends it's a bad period." I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the phrase, "hides it from her husband," caught my attention. For some reason, I thought of my daughter-in-law, Chloe. She and Daniel had been married for 5 years without children. Whenever I asked, she'd just say they were trying. The nurses moved on, and I tried to recall what Chloe looked like. She always wore perfect makeup and fashionable clothes. She ordered Daniel around, and my son acted like a timid servant in her presence. When the IV bag was empty, I felt much better. Dr. Arthur said I needed to stay for 2 days of observation and had me sign a stack of forms for various tests. At 3 in the afternoon, he personally wheeled me down for a cardiac ultrasound. As we passed the obstetrics department, the sound of a shrill argument erupted from one of the exam rooms. "What kind of useless hospital is this? You can't even save one baby." That voice, it was unmistakably Chloe's. "Mrs. Daniel, your uterine lining is too thin. It's not suitable for pregnancy," a doctor explained patiently. But Chloe cut her off. "Shut up! I didn't pay all this money to listen to you lecture me," Chloe shrieked hysterically. "If my husband finds out I miscarried again." Dr. Arthur and I froze in the hallway, staring at each other. The exam room door flew open, and an enraged Chloe stormed out, nearly colliding with my wheelchair. When she saw me, her face went white as a sheet. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she stammered, her eyes darting around. "My heart isn't feeling well," I said softly. "What about you? What's wrong?" She frantically tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "Just a routine gynecological checkup." A female doctor emerged from the room and stopped short when she saw us. "Mrs. Daniel, your test results." Chloe snatched the report from her hand, stuffed it in her purse, and forced a smile. "Mom, let me take you back to your room." "That won't be necessary," Dr. Arthur said coolly. "We have another test to get to." Chloe looked as if she'd been granted a pardon. She quickly said, "Well, you get some rest," and fled down the hall. I watched her go, a thick fog of suspicion clouding my mind. "Is that your daughter-in-law, doctor?" Arthur asked as he pushed my wheelchair forward. "She seems to have quite a temper." I gave a bitter smile and didn't answer, but I knew the truth. Chloe had been lying to Daniel all along. She was the one who couldn't have children, but had pretended they were trying. The ultrasound went smoothly. The doctor said my heart showed some signs of ischemia, but nothing too serious. I just needed to manage it with lifestyle changes. Back in my room, a nurse brought in some mail that had been forwarded from the community center. I opened it and froze. It was an official notice of redevelopment. Due to urban renewal, the entire Elm Street district was scheduled for demolition and reconstruction. It was there in black and white. All 5 of my townhouses were in the redevelopment zone. The assessed value was $18,000 per square foot. For all 5 properties, I did a quick calculation. It was nearly $10 million. My hands started to shake. These properties, left to me by my husband, were our life's savings, bought with every penny we had scrimped and saved. Though old, they were in a prime location. The rental income provided a steady stream of money, my nest egg for retirement. My cell phone rang. It was Daniel. I took a deep breath before answering. "Mom, Chloe said she ran into you at the hospital. What's wrong?" His voice was unusually urgent. "Which hospital are you at? I'm coming over right now." My heart skipped a beat. In all these years, he had never been so anxious when I was sick. Was he worried about me, or had he found out about the redevelopment? "It's nothing, just a little anemia," I said, deliberately downplaying it. Dr. Arthur insisted I stay for observation. "I'm on my way," he said, and hung up before I could finish. Less than half an hour later, Daniel burst into the room, with a frantic-looking Chloe trailing behind him. I noticed her eyes were red and swollen. She had clearly been crying. "Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner?" Daniel squeezed my hand, his eyes filled with a concern I hadn't seen in years. "What did the doctor say?" "It's nothing serious," I replied calmly. "I just need to rest for a few days." Chloe sidled up, her face plastered with a fake smile. "Mom, you scared us to death. The second Daniel heard you were in the hospital, he dropped an important meeting and rushed right over. I looked at her perfectly shaped eyebrows and bright lipstick and remembered her hysteria outside the OB, divided by Gin office. Just how many things had this woman hidden from my son? "By the way," Daniel asked, trying to sound casual, "I heard our old neighborhood is being redeveloped. Is that true?" There it was. I laughed coldly to myself but kept my face impassive. "Yes, I just got the notice." "That's fantastic," his eyes lit up. "Those old houses are finally worth something. Mom, what are you planning to do?" "I haven't decided yet," I said slowly. "Maybe I'll keep one for myself, and the rest." "Let me handle it," Daniel interrupted eagerly. "I know people at the redevelopment office. I can get you a better compensation package. You're getting older. You shouldn't have to worry about these things." Chloe chimed in. "That's right, Mom. Daniel is your only son. If he doesn't help you, who will?" I watched this couple, one echoing the other, and the dull ache in my chest returned. The greed in their eyes was barely concealed, as if the houses were already theirs. "We'll see," I said, closing my eyes. "I'm tired. I want to sleep." After they left in high spirits, I took out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years, my husband's old friend, the lawyer Robert Fisher. "Robert, it's Helen," I said, my voice catching. "I need to ask for your advice on something." Robert Fisher's law firm was located in an old office building downtown. 3 days after being discharged from the hospital, I came here, leaning on my cane. The slight feeling of weightlessness as the elevator ascended made my heart feel a little uneasy again. "Helen." Robert stood at his office door to greet me. He looked much older than the last time I'd seen him. His hair was completely white, but he still stood tall and straight. "It's been too many years." I took his hand, my eyes welling up. "Robert, I'm sorry to bother you." "Don't be silly," he said, helping me to a seat and pouring me a cup of hot tea himself. "After John passed, I failed to look after you and your son." At the mention of my late husband, I nearly broke down in tears. Robert and my husband had been college roommates. Later, one went into politics, the other into business, but they had always remained close friends. After my husband's death, Robert visited us often, until 5 years ago when I heard he had gone abroad with his son for his studies. "Your son's name is Daniel, right?" "How is he doing?" Robert asked. I gave a bitter smile and told him everything that had happened recently. The redevelopment notice, my son's sudden concern, and stumbling upon Chloe's secret at the hospital. Robert listened, his brow furrowed. He got up and pulled a file from his cabinet. "Helen, there's something you need to know." Inside the file were several consultation records, all bearing Daniel's signature. Last month, Daniel came to my office to inquire about the validity of a senior citizen's will. Robert's voice was heavy. He asked if a child could apply for a change in guardianship and property management rights if the parent had dementia or was mentally incompetent. My hands began to tremble, the words on the page blurring before my eyes. "I thought it was a routine inquiry, so I didn't think much of it," Robert sighed. "But now it seems he's targeting you." I put the file down, my voice surprisingly calm. "Robert, what should I do about my will?" Robert pushed his glasses up his nose. "First, you need to get a legally recognized assessment of your mental state. Second, it's best to set up a trust for your will, stipulating that the inheritance can only be claimed after your natural death. If anything unexpected happens, the assets will be donated to charity." "A trust," I repeated the unfamiliar word. "And one more thing," Robert lowered his voice. "Be careful, especially with your food and medication." My heart sank. He was implying that Daniel might try to harm me. After leaving the law firm, I didn't go straight home. I went to the city planning office to get more details about the redevelopment. An employee told me there were two compensation options: a cash payout or a replacement home in the new development. A decision had to be made within 3 months. "Mrs. Helen," a friendly staff member whispered, "your son was here yesterday. He said he wanted to handle the paperwork for you." I thanked him and left, a heavy stone in my heart. Daniel was already eager to get his hands on my property. When I got home, I took out all my property deeds and bank books to inspect them. Sure enough, the position of several deeds had been shifted. There were also marks on the combination lock of my safe, signs of a failed attempt to open it. But what chilled me to the bone was that the order of the bottles in my medicine cabinet had been changed. Someone had been tampering with my medication. I collapsed onto the sofa, a cold dread washing over me. This was the son I had raised with so much love and sacrifice. For money, he was willing to disregard his own mother's life. The phone rang abruptly. It was Daniel. "Mom, where have you been? I called you several times," he said, a note of accusation in his voice. "I just went for a walk," I said, forcing myself to remain calm. "Oh," he said, clearly not believing me, but he didn't press the issue. "Chloe made some chicken soup. We'll bring it over tonight." After hanging up, I immediately packed a bag with my regular medications and a few changes of clothes. Then I sent a text message to Dr. Arthur, asking if he could recommend a reliable lab for testing. At 6 o'clock that evening, Daniel and Chloe arrived as promised, carrying a pot of chicken soup and several boxes of nutritional supplements. Chloe was cloyingly attentive, personally serving me soup and insisting on watching me drink it. "Mom, this is an imported iron supplement," Daniel said, holding out a box of elegantly packaged blue vials. "One a day, it's especially good for your heart." I took the box, pretending to read the instructions carefully, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw him exchange a look with Chloe. "Thank you," I said, smiling as I placed the supplements on the coffee table. "I'll drink it later." "Drink it now, Mom," Chloe said, her tone almost a command. "I'll only feel at ease once I've seen you drink it," Daniel chimed in. "That's right, Mom. Chloe bought this especially for you." Under their watchful eyes, I had no choice but to open a vial and pretend to take a few sips, holding the liquid in my mouth until I could find a chance to spit it out. Only then was Chloe satisfied. She then served me a bowl of the chicken soup. After they left, I immediately spat the liquid into the toilet and flushed it several times. Then, I found an empty pill bottle in the medicine cabinet, poured the remaining supplements into it, and sealed it tightly. The next morning, I took this bottle of evidence to the lab Dr. Arthur had recommended. During the 2 days I waited for the test results, I did 3 things. First, I went to the bank and transferred my savings to a new account. Second, I contacted the local senior center and signed up for some activities. Third, I pretended to have a heart attack and called Daniel. "Mom, What's wrong? On the other end of the line, Daniel's voice sounded distant, drowned out by the noise of a busy conference room. My heart, it hurts, I said weakly. Can you come over? I'm in an important meeting, he said impatiently. I'll call an ambulance for you. Half an hour later, the ambulance arrived. When the paramedics found that I was only feeling slightly unwell, their attitude cooled considerably. Ma'am, please don't call an ambulance unless it's a real emergency, a young paramedic scolded. You're wasting medical resources. I apologized profusely, but my heart was as cold as ice. This was my son. He wouldn't even come to see his mother when he thought she was dying, just sent an ambulance to deal with it. The test results came back on the third day. Dr. Arthur delivered them to my house himself. His face was grim. Helen, he said, handing me a report. These supplements contain a low dose of a digitalis-like substance. Long-term use can cause cardiac arrhythmia and, in severe cases, death. My hand trembled so violently that the report rustled in my grasp. My own son, was he really trying to poison me? Have you called the police? Dr. Arthur asked. I shook my head. It's not enough. What's not enough? The evidence isn't enough? I took a deep breath. My lawyer, Robert Fisher, said I need to gather more evidence. Dr. Arthur looked at me in shock, as if he were seeing this frail old woman for the first time. All right, he nodded. What do you need me to do? Nothing for now, I said with a weak smile. But if my condition worsens, please, you must come. He squeezed my hand tightly. Call me anytime, 24 hours a day. After Dr. Arthur left, I looked at the schedule for the senior center. There was a legal seminar tomorrow, presented by a retired judge named Wallace. I circled the time. I had decided to go and meet this expert. That evening, Daniel called, feigning concern about my health. I deliberately spoke in a weak, breathy voice, telling him the doctor said my condition wasn't good and I needed long-term rest. Mom, don't you worry. His voice suddenly became eager. Chloe and I will take care of you. By the way, have you thought any more about the redevelopment? I think I'll leave it all to you, I said weakly. But I need to write a will first. A will? His voice jumped an octave. You're writing a will? Yes, I have an appointment with my lawyer tomorrow, I said vaguely, just in case something happens to me. Mom, don't talk like that, he interrupted hastily. You're going to live a long, long time. So, what time are you meeting the lawyer tomorrow? Chloe and I should go with you. The fish was on the hook. A cold smile touched my lips, but my voice remained frail. No, that's all right. You're both so busy with work. I hung up and went to the window, gazing at the city lights in the darkness. Tomorrow, my performance would begin. The activity room at the senior center was warm and bright. About 24 seniors were gathered around, listening to Judge Wallace explain the laws protecting the rights of the elderly. He looked to be in his early 70s, his silver hair neatly combed, his voice strong and clear. It was hard to believe he had been retired for many years. A living trust is the most effective way to protect your assets, Judge Wallace said, adjusting his reading glasses, especially when you suspect your children might harm you for your property. My heart leaped. This was exactly the information I needed. After the seminar, I waited until everyone else had left before approaching him and introducing myself. When Judge Wallace heard I was a friend of Robert Fisher, he became very cordial. Mrs. Helen, is there something I can help you with? He asked perceptively. I briefly explained the situation with the redevelopment and my son, omitting the part about the poison supplements. Judge Wallace listened, then paused in thought. You need to do 3 things, he said, holding up 3 fingers. First, get a mental competency evaluation to prove you are of sound mind. Second, establish a living trust. And third, gather evidence. Evidence? Evidence that proves your son has malicious intent, he said, lowering his voice. For example, audio or video recordings. If you were to create a will leaving him everything, how would he react? My heart pounded. This was exactly what I had been planning to do. When I left the senior center, I had Judge Wallace's business card and a few legal pamphlets in my purse. As I reached the entrance, I saw Daniel's car parked by the curb. He and Chloe hurried out and walked towards me. Mom, what are you doing here? Daniel asked, a look of concern on his face. "Didn't you say you were meeting your lawyer today?" I feigned surprise. "What are you two doing here?" "We were worried about you," Chloe said, linking her arm through mine, her grip so tight it hurt. "You're not well. You shouldn't be out by yourself." I noticed her eyes kept darting to my purse, clearly trying to see if I had already drawn up a will. "I was just at a seminar," I said vaguely. "I rescheduled the appointment with the lawyer." "You can't do that," Daniel almost shouted. Then, realizing his outburst, lowered his voice. "Mom, you can't delay something like this. Why don't we go today? I know a very good lawyer." "That's not necessary," I said, starting to walk towards the bus stop. "I've already made an appointment with Robert Fisher." "Robert?" Daniel's face changed. "But isn't he still overseas?" "He's back," I said lightly. "He's handling it for me." Daniel and Chloe exchanged an uneasy glance. They were unusually silent on the drive home. It wasn't until we were at my door that they put on their smiles again. "Mom," Daniel said, opening the door for me, "you get some rest. We'll bring dinner over tonight." After they left, I immediately searched every corner of my apartment. Sure enough, I found a tiny camera hidden in the living room light fixture and another one in a bedroom outlet. My heart sank, but a new resolve hardened within me. If they were going to spy on me, then I would give them a show. I changed into my pajamas, lay down weakly in bed, and deliberately muttered to myself in view of the camera, "Oh, I'm getting weaker and weaker. I need to get this sorted out quickly." Then I dialed Robert Fisher's number and said loudly, "Robert, I've made up my mind. I'm giving all the houses to Daniel. Yes, all of them. He's my only son, after all." After hanging up, I pretended to cough, stumbling dramatically to the medicine cabinet. With a trembling hand, I poured a glass of water and took my medication. Of course, the pills were just vitamins. That evening, Daniel and Chloe arrived as expected, bringing hot food with them. As soon as Chloe entered, she solicitously helped me to a seat, served me soup, and piled food on my plate, her words as sweet as honey. "Mom, how did your talk with Robert go today?" Daniel asked casually. It went well," I said with a weak nod. "I'm signing the papers in a couple of days." A flicker of delight crossed Chloe's eyes, quickly replaced by a look of concern. "Mom, you look very pale. Do you want to go to the hospital?" No, I shook my head. "It's just my old ailment." They insisted on watching me take my supplements before they would leave. After they were gone, I immediately spat out the pills and saved them in another small vial. More evidence. The next day, I went to Robert Fisher's office and formally created my will. Following Judge Wallace's advice, I set up a living trust, stipulating that Daniel could only inherit the property after my natural death. If I were to die under suspicious circumstances, all my assets would be donated to a foundation for the elderly. "Helen, are you sure you want to do this?" Robert asked gravely. I nodded, my eyes brimming with tears. "I can't let him succeed, but I don't want to destroy him either." "You're too soft-hearted," Robert sighed, handing me a document. "This is the mental competency evaluation. It proves you are of sound mind. I've contacted an old friend. He can notarize it for you at any time." After leaving the law firm, I went to an electronics store and bought a miniature audio recorder and several hidden cameras. When I got home, I carefully installed them in discreet locations in the living room, bedroom, and kitchen. If Daniel could spy on me, why couldn't I record their true colors? With everything in place, my performance began. Every day, I feigned illness in front of their cameras, deliberately letting them overhear false updates about my will, all while my own devices recorded their every move. 3 nights later, Daniel came alone, bringing even more supplements. I noticed the first thing he did upon entering was check the medicine cabinet to see if I had been taking my medication on time. "Mom," he said, sitting by my bed, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "How have you been feeling lately?" Much better," I said weakly. "About the will. I'm signing it with Robert tomorrow," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Everything goes to you." Daniel's eyes lit up instantly, a smile spreading uncontrollably across his face. "Mom, don't say that. You're going to live a long, long life." but his expression betrayed him. It was the unrestrained joy of someone on the verge of getting everything they wanted. My heart was like ice, but I maintained a weak smile. "Daniel," I said, taking his hand, "you're the only son I have. Everything I have is for you." "Mom," he said, his eyes suddenly turning red. I was not expecting that. I... For a fleeting moment, I thought he was going to confess, to break down in tears and admit his wrongdoing. But then his phone rang. It was Chloe. He went out to the balcony to take the call, his voice low, but I still caught the key phrases. "Signing tomorrow. Everything's ours. Right, she won't last much longer. The medicine is working." I closed my eyes, tears silently streaming down my face. This was my son, the continuation of my life, now counting down the days until my death. When Daniel came back in, I pretended to be asleep. He stood by my bed for a while, then tiptoed out. I heard him rummaging around in the living room, probably checking my documents to confirm the details of the will. After the sound of the door closing, I sat up and reviewed the footage from my hidden cameras. Daniel had not only gone through my filing cabinet, but he had also checked the medicine cabinet, counted the number of supplements, and even gave a thumbs up to their hidden camera. With trembling hands, I saved the video clip to a flash drive and, along with all the other evidence I had collected, locked it in a safe deposit box at the bank. The next day, I met with Robert Fisher and Judge Wallace at a coffee shop and showed them some of the evidence. They were both silent for a long time after watching. "This is enough to press charges," Judge Wallace finally said. "But what do you want to do?" I took a deep breath. "I want to wait a little longer. I want to see just how cruel he can be." Robert looked at me with concern. "That's too dangerous. What if he finds out you're gathering evidence?" "I'm prepared," I said, taking out my phone. I showed them a pre-written text message to Dr. Arthur. If I didn't contact him within 2 hours, he was to call the police immediately. After leaving the coffee shop, I went to the senior center to attend a legal aid clinic organized by Judge Wallace. There, I met several other seniors in similar situations. We shared our stories and supported each other. One woman, Mrs. Liu, had a particularly heartbreaking story. Her son had put her in a substandard nursing home in order to get his hands on her property. "I escaped," Mrs. Liu said, squeezing my hand. Her rough palm was warm and strong. "Now I'm renting a place with a few other ladies. Judge Wallace helped us sue and get our houses back." "Don't you hate your son?" I asked in a low voice. A flicker of pain crossed Mrs. Liu's eyes. "I do, but I also want him to be well. He visits me once a month now, which is more than he did before." On the way home, I kept thinking about Mrs. Liu's words. Yes, I hated what Daniel was doing, but deep down, I still hoped he would come to his senses, that he would turn back into the kind little boy he once was. But that hope was shattered completely that evening. The notice from the redevelopment office came earlier than expected. I was sitting on the balcony, enjoying the sun, when the doorbell rang. A city employee personally delivered the official assessment report. The total value of my 5 properties was $12 million. I was required to sign a letter of intent within 1 week. "Mrs. Helen," the young employee said softly, "your son came by yesterday. He asked if he could sign on your behalf." I thanked him and saw him out, then immediately called Robert Fisher. He advised me to sign the agreement as soon as possible, but to do it myself and not let Daniel get involved. I had just hung up when the doorbell rang again. Through the peephole, I saw Daniel and Chloe standing outside, their hands full of gift bags. Ever since I had pretended to write the will in their favor, the frequency of their smiling visits had increased noticeably. "Mom, we're here to see you." As soon as I opened the door, Chloe gave me an enthusiastic hug, her perfume so strong it made me dizzy. "We brought you some bird's nest soup and cordyceps." Daniel was also all smiles. "Mom, how are you feeling today?" I coughed a couple of times for effect. Much, much better." They flanked me, guiding me to the sofa. Chloe even knelt down to take off my shoes and massage my feet, something that would have been unimaginable before. I silently watched their performance, my heart as cold as stone. "Mom," Daniel said, rubbing his hands together, a greedy glint in his eyes. I heard the redevelopment office sent the official notice. So that's what this was about. I nodded. Yes, they just delivered it. That's great. He almost jumped up. Where is it? Let me see. I slowly pulled the document from the coffee table drawer and handed it to him. Daniel eagerly flipped through it. When he saw the $12 million figure, his eyes widened. $12 million? He exclaimed. Chloe leaned over to look, her face a mask of pure ecstasy. Mom, you're rich, Daniel said excitedly. I'll go with you to the redevelopment office tomorrow to sign the papers. I shook my head. No, I'll go by myself. You can't do that, Chloe said sharply. You're not well. What if something happens on the way? Exactly, Daniel chimed in. Mom, just let me handle it. I'm your son, after all. I looked at their eager faces and suddenly asked, Daniel, if I gave you all the money, what would you do with it? He was taken aback for a moment, then his face lit up. Of course, I'd buy a bigger house. We'd sell this dump you're living in now. Chloe and I have our eye on a villa, and we'd invest the rest. Invest in what? I asked softly. Well, a friend of mine has a project, he stammered. It's a sure thing. Chloe quickly changed the subject. Mom, have some bird's nest soup. I made it especially for you. She got up and went to the kitchen. I noticed her give Daniel a subtle look. Daniel took the hint and pulled an exquisite box from his bag. Mom, this is the latest heart medication from overseas. It's very effective. He opened the box to reveal several blister packs of blue capsules. One a day. You should try it. I took the box, pretending to examine it. Did a doctor prescribe this? Well, no, he said, his eyes shifting. A friend of mine brought it back for me from abroad. I laughed coldly to myself. This medication didn't even have a proper FDA approval number, and he had the audacity to claim it was prescribed. All right, I'll take it later, I said, setting the box aside. Take it now, Mom, Chloe said, emerging from the kitchen with a bowl of soup. I asked around. This medication works best when taken with bird's nest soup. Under their insistence, I had no choice but to take out a capsule and pretend to swallow it, hiding it under my tongue. Chloe wouldn't be satisfied until she had checked my mouth, so I had to pretend to drink some water to spit the pill into the cup. After they left, satisfied, I immediately packaged the capsule and a sample of the soup and sent them to the lab the next day. At the same time, I contacted Julia Ramirez, the young journalist my late husband had once sponsored. Julia, I need your help with something, I said, showing her some of the evidence at a coffee shop. Julia's face grew grave as she looked through it. Mrs. Helen, this could be considered attempted battery. How do you want to report it? Not yet, I said, shaking my head. I want to give Daniel one last chance. The test results came back the next day. The blue capsules contained a potent cardiac glycoside. An overdose would cause cardiac arrest. Holding the report, my hand trembled so much I could barely read the paper. My own son was systematically trying to murder me. That night, my condition took a sudden turn for the worse. I called Daniel. He rushed over. When he saw me lying weakly in bed, a flicker of joy crossed his eyes, quickly replaced by a look of concern. Mom, what's wrong? My heart, it hurts, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The medicine isn't working. I'll take you to the hospital right now, he said, but he didn't move. No, don't, I shook my head. Daniel, I don't think I'm going to make it. Mom, don't say that, he said, his voice laced with fake sobs, but his eyes were fixed on my nightstand, where the forged draft of my will lay. The redevelopment papers, I said, my words coming in gasps. You'll go with me tomorrow to sign them. Daniel's eyes lit up. Yes, Mom, don't you worry. I'll take care of everything for you. After he left, I got out of bed and reviewed the footage from the hidden camera. The moment Daniel was out my door, he excitedly called Chloe. Signing tomorrow. The old woman's not going to last. Right, the medicine is working. After she signs, we'll take her straight to the notary's office. I turned off the video, my vision blurred by tears. Was this how my life was going to end? Deceived, betrayed, and even poisoned by the son I had raised. The next morning, I dressed carefully and waited for Daniel to pick me up. Before leaving, I gave a backup of all the evidence to Dr. Arthur for safekeeping, and sent a text message to Julia Ramirez. I'm going with my son to the redevelopment office to sign the papers today. If anything unexpected happens. Daniel arrived on time, dressed in a sharp suit, looking refreshed and energetic. He solicitously helped me into the car, murmuring sweet nothings all the way, as if he were truly a devoted son. The redevelopment office was crowded. As we waited in line, Daniel kept nervously wringing his hands and checking his watch. When it was finally our turn, the clerk handed me a thick agreement. Mrs. Helen, please read this carefully before you sign. I slowly flipped through the pages. Daniel fidgeted beside me. Mom, it's just standard boilerplate. Just sign it. Wait, I said, pointing to a page. It says here I can choose a replacement home. The cash is better, Daniel said impatiently. It will take years to get a replacement home. The clerk gave him a strange look. Sir, your mother should be the one to decide. Mom? Daniel hissed, his voice laced with a threat. Didn't you say you were giving everything to me? Sign it. I looked at his contorted face and suddenly asked, Daniel, do you remember when you were 10 and had a high fever, and I carried you on my back for 2 miles to get to the hospital? He was taken aback. Why? Why are you bringing that up now? Do you remember how hard it was raining that day? I continued. Do you remember how I stayed up for 3 days and 3 nights in the hospital hallway watching over you? Mom? Sweat beaded on his forehead. Just sign it. There are people waiting. I took a deep breath and pulled a folder from my purse. Before I sign, I want you to see something. Inside the folder were the lab reports, screenshots from the videos, and transcripts of the audio recordings. As Daniel looked through them, his face grew paler and paler until it was as white as a sheet. What is this? He stammered. Evidence, I said calmly. Evidence that you and your wife have been trying to murder me. You're lying, he said, jumping to his feet, the chair clattering to the floor behind him. Mom, you're senile. The clerk and the other people in the office all turned to look at us. I slowly stood up. Though I was a head shorter than him, my presence was commanding. Daniel, my voice was not loud, but it was crystal clear. I'm giving you one last chance. Go to the police. Confess what you've done. You're insane, he shrieked. My mother has Alzheimer's. You can't believe a word she says. I took out my phone and played a recording, a conversation between Daniel and Chloe, discussing how to use the medication to hasten my death. The recording played clearly in the quiet office, and everyone stared at us in shock. It's fake. It's all fake. Daniel's face was ashen. He turned to run. Just then, the doors opened, and 2 police officers walked in with Julia Ramirez. When Daniel saw the police, his legs gave out, and he collapsed to the floor. Mr. Daniel, one of the officers said sternly, we've received a report that you are a suspect in a case of aggravated battery and attempted murder. Please come with us. As they led him away, Daniel looked back at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of terror and disbelief. He had probably never imagined that his weak, compliant mother could be so resolute. Julia came over and gently took my hand. Mrs. Helen, do you need me to take you home? I shook my head, straightened my back, and walked out of the redevelopment office. The sun shone on my face, warm and bright. For the first time in my 79 years, I felt truly clear-headed and free. The interrogation room at the police station was starkly lit. I sat on a hard chair, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Across from me, a young female officer, Officer Lynn, was carefully reviewing the evidence I had provided. Mrs. Helen, she said, putting down the last lab report, this evidence is very compelling, but we will need to verify its source and legality. I nodded and took the notarized mental competency evaluation from my purse. My mental state is perfectly sound. All the evidence was collected legally while I was of sound mind. Officer Lynn took the document, her expression softening slightly. Your son is currently being questioned in the next room. Based on our preliminary investigation, he and your daughter-in-law are indeed suspected of aggravated battery. The door opened quietly, and Julia Ramirez walked in, giving me a nod. Officer Lynn hesitated for a moment, but allowed her to stay and observe. Mrs. Helen, Julia whispered, I just got the surveillance footage from the redevelopment office. It shows your son trying to force you to sign. Officer Lynn took the flash drive and plugged it into her computer. The screen immediately displayed Daniel anxiously pressuring me at the office and his panicked reaction after hearing the recording. This video can be used as supplementary evidence, Officer Lynn noted. Mrs. Helen, do you intend to press formal charges? I took a deep breath. I'd like to speak with him first. Officer Lynn was slightly surprised but quickly understood. Very well. We can arrange an informal conversation. 10 minutes later, I was led into a mediation room. Daniel sat across from me, his face pale and his eyes bloodshot. When he saw me, he shot up from his chair, only to be pushed back down by the officer beside him. Mom, his voice was a hoarse whisper. I didn't know about the medicine. Daniel, I cut him off, my voice surprisingly calm. How much do you owe the loan sharks? He flinched as if he'd been electrocuted. How did you know? A guess, I said with a bitter smile. What else but gambling debts and loan sharks could drive you to do something so desperate? Daniel's shoulders slumped, and tears suddenly streamed down his face. $800,000. With interest, it's almost $1.2 million now. They said they were going to cut off my hands. I closed my eyes, a sharp pain stabbing at my chest. $1.2 million, exactly the amount of the redevelopment payout. To pay off his debts, my son was willing to poison his own mother. Does Chloe know? I asked softly. She was the one who suggested it, Daniel sobbed. She said you were old and were going to die soon anyway, so it might as well be sooner. I shot up from my chair, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. At that moment, I regretted ever bringing him into this world. Mrs. Helen, Officer Lynn said, rushing to support me as I swayed. You need to rest. I waved her away, holding on to my last shred of dignity as I walked out of the room. In the hallway, Julia and I ran into Chloe. When she saw me, her face turned deathly pale. Mom? She cried, rushing forward to grab my hand. It was all a misunderstanding. My cousin gave me the medicine. She said it was good for the heart. I didn't know. I stepped aside, avoiding her touch. Your cousin? She works at a pharmaceutical company. Chloe stammered. But the medicine, really? That's enough, Julia said sharply. Mrs. Helen, let's get out of here. Sitting in Julia's car, I finally broke down. All the pain and grievances accumulated over 79 years of life burst forth like a flood. Julia silently handed me tissues, waiting until I had cried my fill before speaking. Mrs. Helen, tomorrow's article will use a pseudonym for you. But this case has already attracted widespread attention. Many media outlets want to interview you. I wiped my tears. No, I want to use my real name. But I want everyone to know, my voice grew firm, that the elderly are not lambs to the slaughter. It was late when I got home. I collapsed onto my bed, exhausted but unable to sleep. There were over a dozen missed calls on my phone, all from Chloe and her family. There was also a text message from an unknown number. Old woman, don't push things too far. Your son's life is in our hands. I immediately called Officer Lynn. Half an hour later, 2 officers came to my house, took my statement, and advised me to move out temporarily. Mrs. Helen, this threat is most likely from the loan shark syndicate, the older officer said. Your son owes them a huge debt. I shook my head. I'm not leaving. This is my home. After the police left, I called Dr. Arthur. Without a word, he packed a bag and moved in with me for the time being. These old bones of mine can still serve as a bodyguard, you know, he said with a smile. But his eyes were deadly serious. The next day, Julia's article was on the front page of the morning paper. Elderly mother outsmarts poisoning son. Although she used pseudonyms, the detailed account caused a sensation. My phone was soon ringing off the hook with calls from reporters, and I had to turn it off. At noon, Robert Fisher and Judge Wallace came to visit, bringing shocking news. Chloe's cousin had been taken into police custody. She worked in the R&D department of a pharmaceutical company and was suspected of illegally taking out experimental drugs. Judge Wallace said the supplements contained unapproved cardiac toxins. Robert added, More importantly, we've discovered that Chloe's family runs a multi-level marketing scheme for health supplements, specifically targeting the elderly. It all clicked into place. Chloe's interest in Daniel was probably a front from the very beginning, a way to get at my property. Will Daniel go to jail? I asked softly. It depends on his willingness to confess and your willingness to forgive. Judge Wallace sighed. But Chloe and her cousin's cases are more serious. They're facing charges of manufacturing and selling toxic and harmful food products, as well as aggravated battery. After they left, the community director came to see me with a few neighbors. The news had spread, and everyone was outraged on my behalf. What touched me even more was that several elderly people who lived alone came to thank me for speaking out for them. My son is being so nice to me now. An 80-year-old woman named Mrs. Zhao said with a laugh. He's afraid I'll sue him like you did. That evening, as Dr. Arthur was changing my dressing, Julia's special report came on the TV. Seeing the hotline number for How the Elderly Can Prevent Family Fraud flash across the screen, I suddenly had an idea. Arthur, I said softly, I want to use a portion of the redevelopment money to start a foundation to help the elderly. Dr. Arthur's eyes lit up. A brilliant idea. We could call it the Pay It Forward Foundation to signify giving back. We drafted a proposal that night. Robert Fisher promised to provide legal services pro bono. Before bed, I received a text from Officer Lin. Your son has agreed to turn state's witness and testify against Chloe's family. This is a major breakthrough in the case. I stared at my phone, my vision blurring with tears again. Should I be relieved that my son was cooperating? Or should I be heartbroken by his moral decay? Outside, a sliver of a moon hung in the night sky, its cold light spilling onto my bed. Tomorrow was the final deadline for the redevelopment office, and my decision would change the fate of many people. The main hall of the redevelopment office was much busier than usual. As I walked in, the buzz of conversation quieted, and countless eyes turned towards me, some curious, some admiring, some sympathetic. Mrs. Helen, the director of the office, came forward to greet me personally. Are you sure you want to sign today? We can grant you an extension. That won't be necessary, I said with a smile, handing him my documents. I've made my decision. Under the watchful eyes of a dozen staff members and citizens, I signed the redevelopment compensation agreement, opting for the cash payout, a total of $12 million for my 5 properties. The scratching sound of the pen on paper was especially loud in the quiet hall. Mrs. Helen, the director hesitated. Your son. He has nothing to do with it, I said calmly. The authority to dispose of these assets is entirely in my hands. When I left the office, Julia Ramirez was waiting for me at the door, her face alight with an excitement she couldn't contain. Mrs. Helen, the police just raided the lab at the pharmaceutical company where Chloe's cousin works. They seized a large quantity of illegal drugs. This case is getting bigger and bigger. I nodded, not surprised. In my call with Officer Lin the night before, she had hinted at a major operation. What are your plans now? Julia asked, helping me into her car. Many people are wondering what you'll do with the payout. Let's talk at home, I said, motioning for her to keep her voice down. There might be reporters lurking nearby. When we got home, Dr. Arthur was organizing his medicinal herbs. He was relieved to hear that the signing had gone smoothly. Once the money is in your account, you need to transfer it quickly. Don't leave it sitting there. End. That afternoon, the bank manager called personally to confirm that the redevelopment funds had been deposited. Following Robert Fisher's long-distance guidance, I divided the money among 3 different bank accounts and set up a dedicated account for the Pay It Forward Foundation. Transfer $5 million into the foundation account for now, I told the bank manager. Of the remaining $7 million, I'll keep $2 million for myself, and the other $5 million, I paused. I'll leave it for now. I had just hung up when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw an unexpected visitor, Daniel. He was alone, his face gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. Mom. The moment I opened the door, he fell to his knees. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I looked at him coldly. The police let you out? I turned state's witness, he sobbed. Mom, Chloe's family, they're all crooks. She can't even have children. All those miscarriages were fake, just to get my money. My heart lurched. I remembered the argument I had overheard at the hospital. So that was it. Chloe had woven one lie after another. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "But don't say I didn't warn you. The house is under surveillance." Daniel flinched. He had clearly learned his lesson about my evidence, gathering abilities. He perched nervously on the edge of the sofa, his hands wringing in his lap. "Mom, the loan sharks," his voice trembled. "They said if I don't pay up soon, they'll kill me." I laughed coldly. "I got the text." Daniel's head shot up. "What? What text?" I showed him the threatening message on my phone. The color drained from his face. It wasn't me. I swear I didn't know." "I know it wasn't you," I said, putting my phone away. "It was the loan sharks. Now they're after me, thanks to you." Daniel broke down completely, kneeling on the floor and clinging to my legs. "Mom, save me! They're going to kill me!" I looked down at the man I had once loved with all my heart, and my own heart felt like it was being torn apart. He was only ever worried about himself, never once thinking about the danger his mother was in. "Daniel," I took a deep breath, "I can help you pay off your debt." His head shot up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "But on one condition," I continued. "First, you must cooperate fully with the police investigation. Second, after the debt is paid, you must accept the legal consequences of your actions. And third," I paused, looking him in the eye, "you must publicly confess your crimes to the media." Daniel's expression shifted from hope to horror. "Publicly? But how will I ever face anyone again? You still have the nerve to worry about that?" I couldn't stop my voice from rising. "When you were poisoning me, did you think about how you would face anyone?" He hung his head in shame, silent for a long time before finally giving a barely perceptible nod. "There's one last thing." I took a document from the drawer. "This is a declaration of severance of our mother-son relationship. Sign it, and we will have nothing more to do with each other." "Mom?" Daniel looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. "No, I can't." "Then I'll see you in court," I said coldly. "I will sue you for attempted murder." He collapsed to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. Finally, with a trembling hand, he signed the document and then, without looking back, bolted out the door. I picked up the paper, and a tear fell onto it, blurring the ink. 39 years of a mother's love, severed in an instant. The doorbell rang again. I thought it was Daniel, coming back to beg. But when I opened the door, I saw the solemn faces of Officer Lynn and two of her colleagues. "Mrs. Helen, we've received a tip that the Loan Shark Syndicate may be targeting you tonight," Officer Lynn said. "Please evacuate with us immediately." I quickly gathered my important documents and the backup of my evidence and left with the police escort. On the way, Officer Lynn told me that Daniel had returned to the police station for protection and had provided crucial information about the Loan Shark Syndicate. "Your son's cooperation will help us take down this entire criminal organization," she said. "The judge will take that into consideration for his sentencing." We were taken to a discreet hotel in the suburbs. Late that night, Officer Lynn knocked on my door, her face beaming. "Mrs. Helen, the operation was a success. All the ringleaders have been arrested. They've confessed to sending the death threats." I breathed a sigh of relief, but there was little joy in my heart. I had won the war, but at a terrible cost. The next day, the case was all over the news. Elderly mother outsmarts matricidal son. Loan shark underworld behind family fraud. Septuagenarian launches Pay It Forward Foundation to help elderly. My story was the talk of the town. Julia Ramirez came to the hotel with her camera crew for an exclusive interview. Facing the camera, I calmly recounted the events and announced that I would be using $5 million of the redevelopment money to establish the Pay It Forward Foundation, dedicated to helping elderly victims of family fraud. "The foundation's first project," I said to the camera, "will be to convert one of my redeveloped properties into a senior living facility, providing free housing for homeless elderly." The response to the interview was overwhelming. My phone was flooded with calls from people wanting to donate. Many strangers expressed their support for the foundation. What moved me even more was that several old friends I had lost touch with called to express their support and admiration. 3 days later, the police confirmed that the threat had been neutralized and it was safe for me to go home. Pushing open the door to my apartment, a familiar scent washed over me. Though I had only been gone for a few days, it felt like a lifetime. There were several letters on the coffee table. The one on top was from Daniel, sent from the detention center. I hesitated for a long time before deciding not to open it. I locked it away in a drawer instead. That evening, Dr. Arthur, Robert Fisher, and Judge Wallace came over for dinner to celebrate the resolution of the case. We sat around the dining table, laughing and talking like old friends. "Helen," Judge Wallace said, raising his glass, "did you know that your case has prompted Congress to discuss amending the Older Americans Act?" Robert also smiled. "My law firm has received over a dozen similar inquiries, all from seniors looking to protect their rights. Dr. Arthur told me that the geriatrics department at the hospital had seen a recent influx of elderly patients coming in for checkups, all brought in by suddenly dutiful children bearing supplements. Hearing all this, I felt both gratified and saddened. Gratified that my experience could help others, and saddened that so many elderly people were still living in fear and deception. By the way," Robert said suddenly, "your son and Chloe's divorce hearing is next week. As his lawyer, I advise you—" "I won't be attending," I cut him off. "The severance papers have been signed." The room fell silent. Finally, Dr. Arthur gently patted my hand and changed the subject. Before bed, I took out the unopened letter again and held it under the lamplight for a long time. The envelope bore Daniel's clumsy handwriting, so much like the first Mother's Day card he had ever written me. In the end, I put the letter back in the drawer. Some wounds need time to heal. Some forgiveness can only be granted with distance. Outside, the moonlight was like water, quietly pooling on my floor. Tomorrow, I would begin a new chapter of my life, no longer as someone's mother, but simply as Helen. The renovation of the senior apartment building, which I named Haven House, was progressing faster than expected. I stood in the freshly painted hallway, watching the workers install handrails and non-slip flooring, a long-forgotten sense of accomplishment swelling in my chest. "Miss Helen," a young contractor named Mike called out, "do you think this height is good for the emergency call button?" I checked the height and position. "Yes, that's perfect. An elderly person in a wheelchair can reach it easily." Ever since I announced I was converting my old Elm Street property into a senior living facility, I had been coming to supervise the construction every day. This 3-story building was the first home my husband and I had bought after we got married. It had been a rental for many years, and now it was finally being given a new life. "Mrs. Helen," a familiar voice called from the doorway. I turned to see Julia Ramirez walking in with her camera, followed by several people I didn't recognize. "This is Mr. Williams, the director of the Department of Social Services," Julia introduced. "He saw our report and wanted to come and see your project for himself." Mr. Williams shook my hand warmly. "Mrs. Helen, your Haven House is a wonderful model. We're considering replicating this model throughout the city." I was flattered and quickly gave them a tour of the facilities under renovation: the accessible bathrooms, the common activity room, the small medical station. Every detail was designed with the needs of the elderly in mind. "What about funding?" Mr. Williams asked with concern. "The redevelopment payout is enough to cover the renovation costs," I said with a smile. "The ongoing operations will be funded by the Pay It Forward Foundation and private donations." After the tour, Mr. Williams promised on the spot to provide policy support, including tax exemptions and professional training for care staff. Julia filmed the entire visit, saying she was doing a special feature. At noon, Dr. Arthur arrived with a thermal lunchbox. Since the incident, he had become my de facto personal physician and bodyguard, making sure I took my medication on time and kept a regular schedule. "How's your blood pressure?" he asked as he served me soup. "Much better," I said, smiling as I took the bowl. "Ever since I stopped taking those supplements, I've even been able to cut back on the medication you prescribed." Dr. Arthur snorted. "It's a good thing you stopped taking that poison, but you still need to take my prescription on schedule." As we were joking, Robert Fisher hurried in, his face grave. "Helen, Daniel's trial is next week. The prosecutor wants to see you." My smile froze. "What about?" The sentencing recommendation, Robert said in a low voice. Considering his cooperation as a state's witness, the prosecution is recommending a 3 to 5 year suspended sentence, but they need your input as the victim. I put down my bowl, the familiar ache returning to my chest. I had been deliberately avoiding thinking about Daniel's case, throwing myself into the construction of Haven House precisely to avoid this moment. "I'll go," I finally said, but not to plead for him, just to tell the truth. Robert nodded in understanding. Dr. Arthur looked at me with concern but said nothing. That afternoon, I met Judge Wallace at the construction site. He had some unexpected news. "Helen, Daniel has been behaving very well in custody. He's even written a letter of remorse. The prison authorities would like you to come and see." "No," I said flatly. "I have no relationship with him anymore." Judge Wallace sighed and didn't press the issue. As he was leaving, he handed me a file. "This is the result of the investigation into Chloe's family's supplement company. The total amount involved is over $20 million. I flipped through the thick report. Behind the shocking numbers were countless deceived elderly people and shattered families. Chloe's approach to Daniel, it seemed, was part of a larger scheme to use my property as a means to launder their illicit profits. That night, I got home and collapsed onto the sofa, exhausted. Julia's new report was on the TV. Pay it forward in action. Haven House lights the way. Seeing the hopeful faces of the seniors who were about to move in, my spirits lifted slightly. The phone rang suddenly. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. Mrs. Helen?" It was a timid female voice. "This is Lynn, Chloe's cousin." I stiffened. The pharmaceutical researcher who had supplied the poison. "I know you hate me," she sobbed. "But I swear I didn't know the medicine was for you. Chloe said it was just for an experiment." "An experiment?" I laughed coldly. "Experimenting on a human being?" No, her voice grew smaller. "She said you were already dying and needed painkillers." I slammed the phone down, shaking with rage. These people were utterly without conscience. They would say anything, do anything, for money. The phone rang again. I was about to ignore it, but I saw it was Officer Lynn. "Mrs. Helen," her voice was excited. "The loan shark ringleader just confessed. He admitted that Chloe was one of their agents, specifically tasked with identifying elderly families with property." I gripped the phone, finally understanding the full extent of the scam. Chloe had targeted Daniel for my property, encouraged him to take out loans to liquidate the assets, and finally, tried to poison me to take everything. It was a carefully orchestrated plot, one step after another. "Did Daniel know?" I asked, my voice trembling. According to the confession, he was initially unaware, but was later drawn in, Officer Lynn said. But he provided key information in prison that helped us take down the entire network. After hanging up, I stood at the window, gazing at the stars. The year my husband died, Daniel was only 10. I had sworn to give him the best life possible, but I never imagined I would raise him to be a criminal who would try to kill his own mother. Had I done something wrong? Or had this materialistic society changed him? Or perhaps he was just born with a selfish gene? There were no answers to these questions, just like the silent stars in the night sky, forever twinkling but never responding. The next day, I went to the hospital for a routine checkup. In the hallway, a familiar figure made me stop in my tracks, Chloe. She was sitting alone outside the OB divided by GYN office, her face haggard, but her belly was noticeably swollen. She saw me too, and her face went deathly pale as she instinctively covered her stomach. "You're pregnant?" I asked in disbelief. Chloe's lips trembled. "It's none of your business." Just then, a doctor came out and, seeing the standoff, looked slightly awkward. "Mrs. Daniel, your prenatal report." I turned and walked away, my heart a maelstrom of emotions. Chloe was pregnant, while Daniel was in jail awaiting sentencing. Was this child a sign of hope, or the beginning of another tragedy? On the way home, I made a detour to the detention center. After much consideration, I had decided to see Daniel one last time, not as his mother, but as his victim. In the visiting room, Daniel was wearing an orange jumpsuit, his face unshaven. When he saw me, a flicker of hope crossed his eyes. "Mom," he choked out, "you came." I sat down, my face expressionless. "Chloe is pregnant." Daniel's eyes widened. "What? What? That's impossible. She can't have children." I gave a cold laugh. "It seems she lied to you about more than one thing." Daniel hung his head, his shoulders shaking violently. "Mom, I was wrong. I really know I was wrong." "Save it for the judge," I said, standing up. "I came today to tell you that I will be testifying in court." "Mom?" He looked up sharply. "You're going to testify against me?" "No." I shook my head. "I will tell the truth, including your cooperation as a state's witness." Tears streamed down his face. Why are you still helping me?" I looked at the boy he once was, now a bearded prisoner, and said softly, "Because no matter how many papers you sign, I will always be your mother." Leaving the detention center, the sun was so bright it hurt my eyes. Tomorrow was the trial, and my Haven house would be officially opening next week. Life is always like this, sorrow and hope intertwined, darkness and light alternating. Just like the sky at this moment, half overcast, half clear and blue. The courtroom was solemn. I sat in the witness box, my hands clasped in my lap, trying to keep them from trembling. Across from me, in the defendant's box, Daniel kept his head down, not daring to meet my eyes. The gallery was packed with reporters, law students, and curious members of the public. "Mrs. Helen," the prosecutor asked gently, "can you please state the facts of the case as they occurred?" I took a deep breath and began, starting from my discovery of the tainted supplements to my collection of evidence, and finally, the confrontation at the redevelopment office. My tone was calm throughout, without exaggeration or omission of any of Daniel's wrongdoings. "After your son became a state's witness, did the Loan Shark Syndicate threaten you in any way?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes," I said, presenting the death threat text message, "but I do not believe my son was responsible for it." The defense attorney seized on this. "Mrs. Helen, do you believe your son is remorseful?" I looked at Daniel. He lifted his head, his eyes full of tears. My voice choked. "I don't know. As a mother, I am willing to give him a chance. As a victim, I need the law to give me justice." The courtroom was silent. The judge lightly tapped his gavel and declared a 10-minute recess. When the trial resumed, the prosecutor presented the sentencing recommendation. Taking into account Daniel's substantial cooperation in exposing the Loan Shark Syndicate and the health supplement fraud network, the prosecution recommended a sentence of 3 years imprisonment, suspended for 5 years. The judge ultimately accepted this recommendation, adding a community service order and mandatory psychological counseling. Daniel wept openly in court, promising to turn over a new leaf. After the verdict was announced, the media swarmed me. I refused all interviews and was escorted out a side door by Robert Fisher and Dr. Arthur. But an unexpected figure blocked our path, Chloe, her belly large and round. "Mom," she called out timidly, her eyes pleading. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" I looked at her coldly. "We have nothing to talk about." "For the baby's sake," she said, touching her swollen abdomen. "Daniel is his father. He's your child too." I cut her off. "Take care of yourself." On the way home, Robert told me that Chloe had been granted bail because of her pregnancy, but would still face trial after giving birth. Her cousin Lynn's case was more serious. She was facing charges of illegally distributing controlled substances and could get more than 10 years. Robert said the entire health supplement fraud network has been dismantled. "Your case has been a great service to the public." I leaned back wearily in my seat, feeling no sense of victory. There were no winners in this war, only wounded survivors. 3 days later, Haven House officially opened. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Mr. Williams from the Department of Social Services was present and announced that the project would be included in the government's list of purchased services. The first 10 residents received their keys with joyful faces, the camera flashes of the media constantly going off. Director Helen, an elderly woman in a wheelchair, said, taking my hand, "Thank you for taking in burdens like us." I knelt down to be at her eye level. "Mrs. Liu, you are not a burden. From today on, this is your home." After the ceremony, Julia Ramirez stayed behind for an exclusive interview. She told me that after her special report aired, 5 other cities had expressed interest in replicating the Haven House model. "Mrs. Helen, you've become a spokesperson for the elderly," she said with a smile. "Many viewers have written in to say that you've given them courage." I shook my head. "I just don't want other seniors to go through what I did." That evening, the apartment complex held a simple welcome party. Watching the residents sit together, chatting, playing chess, and watching TV, I felt a long-lost sense of peace and contentment. There were no schemes here, no calculations of personal gain, only the warmth of mutual support. Dr. Arthur quietly came up to me. "Tired? Want to turn in early?" I smiled and shook my head. "I'll sit for a little while longer. Watching them puts my mind at ease." He nodded in understanding and sat with me on the sofa in the corner. We watched the scene before us in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. "Arthur," I asked suddenly, "do you think I should forgive Daniel?" "Doctor," Arthur thought for a moment. "Forgiveness isn't for him," he said. "It's for you." "Yes, carrying a grudge is too exhausting." I sighed and didn't answer. The word forgiveness was too heavy. I wasn't ready to carry it yet. The next day, I received a letter from the prison. This time, I opened it. In neat handwriting, Daniel filled the page with words of remorse. He had also drawn a childish pencil sketch of me, teaching him how to write when he was a little boy. At the end of the letter, he wrote, "Mom, whether you forgive me or not, I will spend the rest of my life making amends for my mistakes. When I get out, I want to volunteer at your apartment complex. I don't ask for you to acknowledge me, only to be able to see you from a distance." I pressed the letter to my chest, tears silently streaming down my face. The child I had once loved with all my heart, now behind bars, had finally understood the weight of family. A week later, Chloe gave birth prematurely. Dr. Arthur was on duty at the hospital and called to tell me the news. "It's a boy, 4 pounds, 8 ounces. A little weak, but his vital signs are stable," he said. "Chloe had a major hemorrhage after delivery and is now in the ICU. I held the phone, at a loss for words. That innocent little life had a father about to serve his sentence and a mother who might also go to jail. "Is anyone looking after the baby?" I finally asked. "He's in the neonatal unit for now. Chloe's parents haven't arrived yet." Dr. Arthur hesitated for a moment. "Helen, do you want to come and see him?" I hung up the phone and stood at the window for a long time. Outside, the spring sun shone on the sign for Haven House, warm and bright. The people living there had all been abandoned by their children, and now, in the hospital, a newborn was facing a future without parents. Finally, I grabbed my coat and car keys and made my decision. In the incubator in the hospital's neonatal unit, the tiny baby slept peacefully, his chest rising and falling gently. The nurse told me they were calling him Baby John for now. "Are you the grandmother?" the nurse asked cautiously. I nodded, then shook my head. "I suppose I am." "Oh, that's wonderful," the nurse said with relief. "The baby needs a family member to sign for further tests." I took the clipboard. In the space for relationship to patient, I paused for a long time before finally writing the word grandmother. After signing, I looked through the glass of the incubator, gently tracing the shadow of the little life's head. This child hadn't chosen his parents, just as Daniel hadn't chosen to be my son. But life gives us more than just our origins. It also gives us the choice of how to face our circumstances. "Little one," I whispered, "Grandma is here." And at the end of the hall, the ICU light was still on. I didn't know if Chloe would make it, or how Daniel would face this child after he was released. But at that moment, I decided to make a promise to this innocent life. No matter what mistakes his parents had made, he would have a grandmother who would never leave him. Just like the promise I had made to another crying baby so many years ago. On the first anniversary of Haven House, the courtyard was decorated with lanterns and banners, bustling with excitement. The residents, dressed in their festive best, gathered in the newly decorated garden, waiting for the celebration to begin. I stood at the entrance, greeting the guests. Officials from the Department of Social Services, journalists, community volunteers, and one special guest, Daniel, who had just been released from prison. He was wearing a simple white shirt and black pants, holding a bouquet of carnations. He stood a little distance from the crowd, not daring to approach. "Mom," he said softly, his eyes red. "Happy anniversary." I took the flowers and nodded. "Come in. I've saved you a seat." Over the past year, Daniel had been a model prisoner and had been granted parole. He wrote to me every week, confessing his wrongdoing and reporting on his rehabilitation. I never wrote back, but I had Robert Fisher relay a message. If he was truly repentant, he could come and see me on the anniversary of Haven House. The celebration was emceed by Dr. Arthur. After retiring, he had become the full-time medical consultant for the apartment complex, the guardian of the residents' health. "First, let's welcome our director, Helen, to say a few words," Dr. Arthur said with a smile, handing me the microphone. I stood at the small podium, looking out at the familiar faces in the audience. The residents, the hard-working staff, the supporters from all walks of life. And Daniel, sitting in the back row, his head bowed. A year ago, Haven House was born from the pain and awakening of an old woman. My voice trembled slightly in the microphone. Today, it has become a home for 23 seniors and a source of pride for the entire community. Thunderous applause. I continued, reporting on the achievements of the past year. In addition to the main building, we had added a daycare center and a cafeteria for the elderly. The Pay It Forward Foundation had helped 17 seniors who had been victims of family fraud to defend their rights. The government had expanded our model to 3 other districts. After the speech, there was a variety of entertainment. The residents showcased their talents, some singing, some reciting poetry, some performing Tai Chi. Finally, the entire staff sang "You Are My Sunshine," bringing the atmosphere to a climax. As the event was winding down, Robert Fisher quietly told me, "Helen, Chloe has applied for parole. She wants to see the child." "How is the child?" I asked softly. Over the past year, little John had been cared for by a nanny I hired and lived in one of my other properties. He was healthy and lively. "The doctor says he's developing well, just a little shy around strangers." Robert hesitated for a moment. "Chloe says she wants to take the child with her when she gets out." I clenched my fists. "What right does she have?" "Legally, she's the biological mother," Robert said helplessly, "unless we can prove she's an unfit guardian." I didn't answer, but my mind was made up. Whatever the cost, I would not let that innocent child follow in his father's footsteps. The crowd slowly dispersed. Daniel lingered until the very end before approaching me. "Mom," he said, his head bowed, Is there anything I can do?" I looked at his thinned face and calloused hands. The past year in prison had clearly taken its toll. "The apartment complex needs a handyman," I said coolly. "The pay isn't high, and the work is hard." Daniel's head shot up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. I can do it. I learned plumbing and electrical repair in prison." 3-month probation," I cut him off. "If you don't work out, you're gone." He nodded repeatedly, tears finally falling. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you." "Don't call me Mom," I said, turning away. "Here, I'm Director Helen." From that day on, Daniel became an ordinary employee of Haven House. He arrived the earliest and left the latest every day, always taking on the dirtiest and most difficult jobs. The other residents didn't know who he was, just thought he was a new hire, and often praised him for being hardworking and considerate. I watched him from a distance, offering no special treatment. Sometimes, when I saw him repairing pipes under the hot sun, his back soaked with sweat, or kneeling on the floor, scrubbing until his hands were pale and wrinkled, a flicker of pity would cross my mind, but I would quickly harden my heart. He needed to pay for his mistakes, and more importantly, he needed to truly understand the value of hard work and dignity through labor. A month later, Chloe's parole hearing was held. I went to court with little John's medical records and a psychological evaluation, proving that the child had adapted to his current living environment and that a sudden change would be detrimental to his development. The judge ultimately ruled that Chloe would be subject to community supervision upon her release, and I would retain temporary guardianship of the child. She could apply for visitation rights only after she had passed a psychological evaluation and found stable employment. Leaving the courthouse, Chloe ran up to me, her eyes filled with tears. "Mrs. Helen, I just want to see my son. I stopped. When you have truly repented. One autumn morning, I was in my office doing paperwork when I got an urgent call from the medical station. Mrs. Liu had fallen. I rushed over, only to see Daniel already carrying her on his back, running towards the medical station where Dr. Arthur was waiting. Her blood pressure is a little high. We need to get her to the hospital, doctor, Arthur said after a quick examination. Without a word, Daniel lifted Mrs. Liu again and carefully placed her on the ambulance gurney. Before he got in the ambulance with her, he looked back at me, his eyes filled with pure concern, with no trace of a performance. At that moment, a crack appeared in the icy wall around my heart. Mrs. Liu was fine, just a mild concussion. She would be back after a few days of observation at the hospital. That evening, I ran into Daniel as he was leaving work. "How is Mrs. Liu?" I asked. "She's sleeping now. Her blood pressure is stable," he answered softly. I'll go and check on her again tomorrow morning." I nodded, and then, unexpectedly, asked, "Have you had dinner yet?" Daniel was stunned, as if he couldn't believe his ears. Not yet." "There are leftovers in the cafeteria," I said, turning back towards the building. "Come with me." In the small dining room, I heated up 2 plates of food and a bowl of soup. Daniel ate ravenously, clearly starved. Looking at his familiar yet strange profile, I was transported back in time to when he was a little boy, always begging me for food. "Why did you carry Mrs. Liu?" I asked suddenly. "You could have called for an orderly." Daniel put down his chopsticks and said seriously, "Because she reminded me of you. If you were to fall one day, I would hope that someone would be there to help you like that." Tears welled up in my eyes, and I couldn't stop them. Daniel panicked, wanting to come over but not daring to, and could only hand me a tissue. "Mom, Director Helen, please don't cry." "Just eat," I said, wiping my tears. "Come in early tomorrow. The leaves in the garden need to be raked." Before the new year, Haven House held a reunion dinner. The residents and staff gathered together to make dumplings and watch performances, the atmosphere warm and festive. Daniel was the host. Though a little nervous, his sincerity won everyone over. After dinner, Dr. Arthur quietly pulled me aside. "Helen, there's something I'd like to ask you." "What is it?" I asked, curious. "Next spring," he said, uncharacteristically shy. "I was wondering if you'd like to go to Seattle with me, just the 2 of us." I was taken aback for a moment, then I understood, a blush creeping up my cheeks. "I'd like that." Just then, Daniel came over with little John. The little one, now over a year old, was already walking and toddled into my arms, babbling. "Grandma?" he called out, the first word his nanny had taught him. Daniel's eyes were misty. "Mom," he said softly. "Thank you for taking care of little John." I didn't answer, just held the child tighter. This innocent little life would not repeat his father's mistakes. With my love and Arthur's guidance, he would grow up to be a kind and upright person. Outside, snowflakes fell gently, blanketing the garden and the paths. Inside, it was warm and filled with laughter. The residents were gathered around, watching the New Year's Eve special. Daniel was busy refilling everyone's tea, and little John was sleeping soundly in my arms. At that moment, I felt a long-lost sense of peace and contentment. In my 80 years of life, I had lost much, but I had also gained much. The old wounds were still there, but they no longer tore at my soul. The future was still full of challenges, but I was no longer afraid, because I knew that, through storm or shine, there would always be people and things worth loving, protecting, and forgiving. Just like the old plum tree outside my window, which, having endured the harshest of winters, still bloomed with the most beautiful flowers.